Welcome inside Levi Stadium where the San Francisco 49ers just wrapped up day one of training camp. I am Kevin John, joined by ABC10's Matt George here, and we were both out here early this morning for training camp and for the post-camp press conferences as well. And Matt, it's interesting. You know, usually every year coming into training camp with the San Francisco 49ers, there can be a little bit of off-season distractions, whether it's holdouts. We've seen that the last few years, injuries, what have you. There's always something. Now, coming into camp this year, the main thing that was kind of lingering was Jauan Jennings' deal. It was reported a couple of weeks ago that 49ers wideout Jauan Jennings either received a contract extension or was going to request the trade. It was one or the other. So that had been making its rounds in the media. Today, Jennings was a full participant in practice, and from what some of his teammates said afterward, he was spirited out there, significant contributor. And, you know, man, I think it's really important to have Jennings out there when you look at how depleted this receiving core is, from Brandon Ayuk to Ricky Pearsall to Marcus Robinson. It goes on and on. So needless to say, I think if there was a bright spot of camp today, it was seeing Jauan Jennings back out there with everyone.
Yeah, I think it's a sigh of relief for the 49ers organization for sure, for head coach Kyle Shanahan, but I also think for the fan base, because there was an element of, oh, here we go again. Last year it was Brandon Ayuk. The year before, or Trent Williams a little bit too. It was Nick Bosa, right?
Debo a few years
Samuel,
ago.
right?
Yeah.
So the Niners are no strangers to holdouts and the impact that can have. And every single time we've consistently seen the player who sits out and misses a good portion of training camp typically doesn't start the season very well. They get off to a slow start. So having Jennings be there, be available, something that stood out to me that Kyle Shanahan said today when asked about Jennings, is he says, I always encourage my players when I share my thoughts with my players on the right way to do it or how I think they should handle it that's best for them. And he says this is the way he thinks that it should happen. Of course, he's going from the perspective of the team, and he wants this team to be as ready to go as possible for the preseason and for week one. But there's definitely seemingly a sigh of relief amongst all of Niner Nation, Niner Gang, that Jauan is here, he's putting in the work, and I think that's leading to more optimism that a deal will get done than a holdout, which is like a get me a deal or else. So it seems like both sides are working on the right path.
Absolutely. And the thing about Jennings, too, is he's kind of just had this incredible story. You know, this was someone who was drafted in the late rounds, I believe 6th or 7th, out of Tennessee a few years ago. And he turned into WR1 last year. Part of that was as a result of all the injuries, you know, like you said. But you know, this is someone who really had to come in here and earn a roster spot through camp. You know, when you're drafted 5th round on, you're not really guaranteed a roster spot. And Jauan is someone who's come in and put in the work year after year. Had the Niners won that Super Bowl 2 years ago, Jennings could have been the MVP of that Super Bowl. He threw for a touchdown, caught another one. So his impact has been vital to this team and with the development of Brock Purdy, and just this offense as a whole. Keep in mind, Jennings was also their leading wideout last year as far as receptions, reception yards, etc. So we know that he can play a significant role, especially if everyone's going down around him.
Well, and it was a double dose of good news for the receiving core, too, because we got to look at Ricky Pearsall, and he's moving fantastic. In fact, Kyle Shanahan shared that had, like, in the old rules, in the olden days, he would have been a full participant and would have played. He was moving and running his routes at 100%, like full sprint speed. In fact, he was even beating some of his fastest times on his routes, which means he's very, very close to a return, hopefully within days, right? It's not like this is something that's going to linger throughout training camp. The Niners hope. He seems to be coming back, and the Niners receiving core desperately needs reinforcements.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of young guys on that receiving core. When you look at, you know, not just Jordan Watkins, who they had drafted this year, but when you look at some of the other guys on there, it's just a very young core. And you know, it's always good to have someone like Jauan, who's been around a few years, to be back out there, just to kind of be a comfort or a soft blanket for Brock. There's a reason we call it 3rd and Jauan. because the man finds a way to get open. So, of course, that's, a quarterback's best friend right there, shall I say. And while we're talking the quarterback position, this was another one that could have drawn out all throughout training camp and whatnot, but fortunately for the 49ers' sake, they got the deal done with Brock Purdy about a month ago. $265 million contract extension. I believe it's over 5 years. And, you talk about good stories. We talked about Juwan Jennings' story. I don't know if there's a better story in the NFL over the last couple of decades as far as quarterback is concerned, other than Brock. Now, he's with this new contract, he's essentially been given the keys to the organization. I mean, he did last year as the starter and whatnot, but this is basically them saying, we're investing in you. This is your team for the future. We are going to build around you. So there's an added level of pressure that I guess comes with the contract. Remember, he was only playing for 900 or 900,000. Funny, I'm saying only 900,000, but he was playing on a bargain the last few years on that rookie deal. So, it's good to see him out there. Now, Matt, I'm not going to lie. There was a few times I saw Brock struggle toward the end of practice when they were in their 11-on-11s, but much better to get that out of the way now than during week 1 of the season. And, from listening to Kittle and everyone talk about Brock afterward and Shanahan, it seems like, they're about as sure can be that this is their quarterback of the future.
Well, look, you paid him like he's the franchise guy, so now he has to be the franchise guy. And that doesn't just mean numbers. That doesn't just mean winning. That means his leadership. And I think this is the first year for Brock where leadership is going to be at the core. And leadership was a topic of conversation throughout a lot of the post-day or post-training camp press conferences, from Nick Bosa stepping up as a leader with the young defense to, of course, George Kittle being the leader that he is and the personality that he is. But Brock's leadership, right? We talked about the young receiving core. Brock's not too old himself, but he's one of the vets of that offense now. So he has to act like it and operate it. And you can see the guys have always respected Brock for what he can do and how great of a story he was. But that paycheck, of course, it brings pressure, but it also brings prestige. And I think there's a newfound or a even firmly more established respect for Brock as the guy, as the leader. And Kittle talked about he's finding his voice to where he's not afraid to tell guys, you ran the wrong route or you screwed this up. And he's starting to really preach that accountability. Not that he's not going to take any accountability on himself, but that's the next step for Brock. We've seen what he can do on the field. Of course, ultimately, the Niners expect that there to be a Super Bowl at the end of it, or multiple Super Bowls at the end of it, or this investment isn't worth it. But for Brock, a lot of eyes are going to be on how he can lead this group going forward, not just in how many passing yards and touchdowns he can throw, but how he can maximize that receiving core and get the absolute most out of the players around him. We've always talked about the talent. He's had Debo, he's had Kittle, he's had McCaffrey. Well, he's also got to maximize the Juwan Jenningses, which he's done a great job of, the Ricky Pearsalls, whatever utility players that Shanahan puts out there, Brock has to make better. That's his job now.
Absolutely, and he's doing it. And we all know the quarterback is the hardest position in all of sports. Basketball, but name a sport. I don't think there's a position that's any harder than the quarterback position. And just to hear Shanahan gloat about how brilliant Brock is and how he does his homework, he comes well prepared into their meetings, and all the work that he's put in this offseason, because physical ability as quarterback can only take you so far. You have to be mentally sound, and that's one of the intangibles that Brock has. Now, Matt, the last thing I wanted to talk about, since we've been talking a lot of offense, and let's not lie, we love offense. Offense sells tickets, but defensively, obviously when you look at this defensive team, Fred Warner is the heart and soul of that defensive team.
Right.
Of course, we've seen guys step up last year like Diamador Lenore, Mustafa, a lot of Nick Bosa, that goes without saying, but you bring in someone like Robert Saleh, and I shouldn't say bring in, you bring back someone like Robert Saleh, who clearly was able to establish a fine culture during his time that he was here. The 49ers were ranked in the top 5 defensively every year that he was the D coordinator here. Last year, they had last year was last year. But, you bring back somebody like that to help bolster this defense and get this defense going back to being the competitive defense that we've known in the time that we've been covering the 49ers. And him working, because remember, even this year, the first, 4 draft picks for the 49ers this year were all defensive.
Right.
Cornerbacks, linebackers, like they wwere building out that. They didn't pick a skilled position or an offensive position, I believe, until the 4th or 5th round when they got Jordan, the receiver. So, you look at what the 49ers have been trying to build defensively, bringing back in somebody like Robert Saleh to work with the vets like Warner and Bosa, but also all these young guys who are looking to go out there and prove themselves. I think Robert just brings a different energy and aura and culture into that defense.
Well, look, Robert got his shot as a head coach in the NFL because he was able to establish that 49ers defense is not just one of the best in the league, but the foundation of this organization's success year after year after year. Now, what's funny is that those teams would have killed to have the offensive weapons that they have now.
Oh.
So can Robert Saleh reestablish that defensive identity? Because we look at the 49ers over the last couple of years, and it's, how many points can the Niners score? How many yards can Purdy throw? How many touchdown receptions or rushes will Christian McCaffrey have? They have all that still, right? But can you back that up to where if the Niners score 28 or more points a game, it's a wrap because no one's going to score that much, right? I'm very interested to see if Saleh can help reestablish a defensive identity here in San Francisco where the offense still matters. You're right, it sells tickets, and we're very excited when Purdy and company steps onto the field. But the Niners are known first and foremost as the team that is going to meet you in the trenches and is going to stop you from doing your thing on the offensive end, especially now I know the Niners have a bit of a weaker schedule this year because of how they finished last year, and hopefully they can take advantage of that. But you still have juggernauts throughout the NFC, like the Philadelphia Eagles and their dominant defense. Of course, the Detroit Lions and their dominant defense. So there are a lot of offensive juggernauts in this league that if the Niners can establish themselves defensively against those when we're talking playoffs and beyond, that might be the difference between making another Super Bowl run or not.
Well, the good news for the Niners is the division they're in is pretty open, maybe outside the LA Rams. When you look at the Cardinals, you look at the Seahawks, you're like, they're not putting fear into anyone. So I would say the NFC West is pretty much going to be between them and the Rams this year. I don't want to say it's up for grabs, but, I do think they could be very competitive in that division. You win your division, you're into the playoffs. And obviously that was something they did not do last year with a 6-11 finish. That was beyond underwhelming and disappointing for all of 49ers Nation. So with that being said, obviously this is only day 1 of training camp. They got a few more weeks to go at this, but the full pads do come on Monday, and we've heard a lot of excitement from the players about that when that starts. So, of course, we will be following that along with the rest of training camp as well. Now, for more information on our 49ers coverage, you can always access the ABC10 YouTube page or the sports page on ABC10.com as we look ahead to the new season. Well, that's a wrap here from Levi's Stadium. If you're wondering, we're in this, I don't know if it's a foyer, it's across from a bar. What do you call this?
It's the field-level luxury suites. We're looking out behind the camera to the windows of the field. It looks like they're putting new sod down and getting it ready for the season. It feels like it's still far away, but it'll be here before we know it.
Exactly. So close, but so far. Well, with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching once again from ABC10. I'm Kevin John. That is Matt George. We also invite you to join us every evening for our sports reports. All right, from Levi's Stadium, that is a wrap on 49ers Training Camp Day 1.